Hi and welcome back to my channel. So you guys, I am so excited about this travel video. Yes, this is my second one this week, but I am so excited about this travel video. Let me tell you why. Because I did a video talking about the real ID requirements for traveling a couple of years ago, and do you guys know I still get people asking me questions about their travel, their IDs, and all that kind of good stuff. And I remember saying a couple of weeks ago, you know, I really need to do an update to that video. So I'll have to do some research and see what's out there. Well, lo and behold, because I get travel related emails every day, probably all day, every day, it popped into my email about what it means, state by state requirements, and everything else you need to know about this new real ID and travel. I said, well, that ain't nothing but the Lord, because I sure was just talking about that actually week before last. So again, this article is by Christy Rodriguez, and it was updated on April the 24th, and which was just a few days ago. And it's called the Real ID Act, what it means, state by state requirements, and everything else you need to know. So let's jump right on in. So recently, the Transportation Security Administration began posting signs at airport security checkpoints warning travelers about some upcoming ID requirement changes. So what exactly are these changes, and what do you need to do to be ready? So here's some FAQs. So what is the Real ID Act? Well, it was formulated in the wake of 9/11 and passed by Congress in 2005. The Real ID Act was passed to set standards for the issuance of sources of identification such as driver's licenses. The Act established minimum security standards for state-issued driver's licenses and identification cards, and it prohibits federal agencies from accepting licenses and identification cards from states that do not meet these standards for official purposes. It was aimed at eliminating airline terrorism by increasing requirements to obtain documents granting access to domestic planes. State agencies like the Department of Motor Vehicle requires more paperwork regarding proof of residency, which is very much true, you guys, and social security number when issuing licenses and identification cards under this new act. In addition, the cards themselves will also be built using new technology, making them much more difficult to forge. It has taken the federal government nearly 15 years, you guys, to implement the act fully. A gradual process that has been met by some confusion as each state has a different status. However, all states will need to be in compliance by October the 1st of 2020. Did you hear what I just said? All states must be in compliance by October 1st of 2020. What does a real ID look like? In most states, there is a gold or black star on the front of the license that will signify compliance. If you see this, then you're good to go. Okay. However, to make it more confusing, a few states have issued compliant IDs without a star. These states are Hawaii, Ohio, Tennessee, and Utah. So it's best to confirm with your state if you don't see that star. You need to check with your state to make sure you are compliant. An easy way to know your card is not compliant is if it says not for federal identification, or it will say federal limits apply. If you see either one of those things on your ID, you're not compliant. What does it mean for me? Well, what does it mean for you? Airports are considered federal facilities, and therefore this act affects your ability to enter in order to board your flight. Starting October 1 of 2020, every state and territory resident will need to present a real ID compliant license or ID or other acceptable form of identification like a passport or a passport card for accessing federal facilities, including boarding commercial aircraft. Residents of states that have already begun issuing the new licenses have until October the 1st of 2020 to obtain a real ID compliant license. So just check your license to be sure. I know mine isn't. I don't have the new one yet because mine has not expired just yet, but I know it's coming. If it is real ID compliant, there will be a star again at the top right corner. I know I don't have that, so I need to get one. Many drivers may not realize they already have one since some states have begun issuing them for a few years now. But if you have a driver's license from one of the states that have been granted an extension, your license is good for air travel through the dates noted on the chart below, and I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. Each state varies slightly. Also, you're going to note that these dates are not set in stone, as states may still obtain another extension beyond the dates as well. The bottom line is this: if you are not in compliance with the Real ID Act by your state's deadline, you will need to show an alternative form of acceptable identification for domestic air travel to board your flight. Simple as that. What the Real ID Act is not. A Real ID is not a substitute for a passport or international travel. There are also a few other things that Real ID does not affect. Real ID requirements do not apply to voting or registering to vote, applying for or receiving federal benefits, being licensed by a state to drive, entering federal facilities that do not require identification, accessing health or life-preserving services, including hospitals and health clinics, law enforcement or constitutionally protected activities, which include a defendant's access to court proceedings. Participating in new law enforcement proceedings or investigations, state-by-state guidance. Now that you know what Real ID is and how it affects you, let's make sure that you understand each state's status. So here's the information on the table. This is the information that I have, okay? So these states are in compliance: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Montana. I'm sorry, wait a minute. You know what? These are in alphabetical order, I believe. And it's just the way the chart is. It is. Okay. So let's go back. So, in compliance: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. So because of the way this is set up, I'm going to read off the states that are compliant. Or I'm going to go, let me say this. I'm just going to read off the states and I'll tell you if they are compliant or not. So Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas are all compliant. Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, all compliant. California is under review through May the 24th of this month. Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, compliant. New Jersey, extension through October the 10th of 2019. New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio are compliant. Oklahoma, extension through October the 10th. Oregon, extension through October the 10th. Pennsylvania, extension through August the 1st. Rhode Island, extension through May. Well, they had an extension through May the 1st, so I don't know how that is at the moment. Iowa, Kansas are compliant. Kentucky, extension through August the 1st. Louisiana, compliant. Maine, extension through August the 10th. Maryland, which is the state I live in. Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, all compliant. South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wyoming, and Wisconsin, all compliant. And I'll try to link this in the description box below. So now that you know where your state stands, don't forget to check out the steps that you should take next. In order to get a Real ID compliant license, you must physically go to DMV with your identification documents, such as a birth certificate and a passport. States will not send you a Real ID compliant license automatically. All states are issuing compliant IDs. However, individuals may still choose not to upgrade their license. So you can choose not to, but it will be complicated for you should you try to travel. What if my state is Real ID compliant? You'll be able to use your state issue ID at airports through October the 1st of 2020. I think it says, I think this question should have been, what if my state is not? So, what if my state has received an extension? You will be able to use your state issued ID at passports through the dates issued in the chart that I just shared with you. This can change as additional extensions may be granted. So, I'm going to I'll list all that information in the description box. So, steps to take to get a compliant ID. Step number 1, you need to make an appointment to visit a DMV field office before your state's deadline. Number 2, on the day of your appointment, make sure you bring all your necessary documents. Y'all don't show up with 1 or 2 things or just 1 thing and then you have to go home and come back and get another number, stay in that long line. Make sure you have everything. So here are the requirements with notable allowed documents. Be sure to check with your local DMV though to confirm. Proof of identification, such as a copy of a U.S. birth certificate. Most of us should have that. A U.S. passport. Well, let me go back. The birth certificate, everybody should have. U.S. passport, most of us have that. Employment authorization document. Permanent resident card. foreign passport with an approved Form I-94, proof of your Social Security number such as a Social Security card, a W-2, or pay stub with your full Social Security number on it, and then 2 proofs of residency, such as a rental or lease agreement, your mortgage, a utility bill, employment, medical, or school document. Now, if applicable, an original or certified copy of a name change document, if you changed your name, such as a marriage certificate or divorce decree, may be required. So if I were you, I would bring that with me just in case they ask, because if you're married, if you recently gotten married, then of course your name on your driver's license is not going to match your new name. Vice versa, if you've gotten divorced and you've changed your name back to your maiden name, you need to make sure you change all of that. Step number 3, pay the fee for your license. This will vary by state, but generally less than $60. Check your state DMV's website for specific fee for the specific fee schedule, because I don't know what every state charges. Now, what if I don't want a Real ID compliant license? I'm glad you asked. You don't have to upgrade your license in order to board your flight, but you will have to use an alternative TSA approved form of ID. TSA currently accepts several other forms of identity, which include the most common alternatives to the Real ID will be a U.S. passport or a U.S. passport card. Other less common items would be DHS Trusted Traveler Cards, Global Entry, Nexus, Century Fast, Permanent Resident Card, Department of Defense ID, Enhanced Driver's License, or federally recognized tribal issued photo ID. For more information on acceptable forms of identification for boarding aircraft, please see the TSA website. I will link that below. However, it should be noted that if the traveler cannot provide an acceptable form of identification, y'all listen to this very clearly. If you cannot provide the ID that they are asking for, you will not be permitted through the security checkpoint to board your flight. Period. End of sentence. So don't show up at the airport and you don't have all your ducks in a row, have everything that they're requesting and requiring of you, and then you want to cut to natural food because they're not going to let you board your flight. I'm telling you what you need. You need to make sure you have everything that you need to get on that flight, because if you do not, they will not allow you to board your flight. And if you act a fool, the police just may arrest you. So I'm just giving you fair warning. What about children under the age of 18? TSA does not require children under 18 to provide identification when traveling with a companion within the United States. Now, you notice I said within the United States. The companion will need acceptable identification, though. So specific airlines may demand proof of the child's age, such as a birth certificate or passport, but this is not regulated by the TSA. Contact the specific airline for more information. So if you're not sure, then you need to contact the airline that you're traveling on to see what the requirements are. Because what I don't want is, I don't want you guys to get to the airport and then you don't have what you need and now you're mad at the world. So final thoughts. Now is the time to make sure you know the requirements in order to be Real ID compliant. In some states, it may take a few weeks or even longer to get an appointment at your local DMV. By taking steps towards compliance now, you can avoid the last-minute rush and be ready to go long before October of 2020. Y'all don't sit around waiting to the last minute. I actually, even as I was reading this, or sharing this, I should say, I'm thinking to myself, I don't have the Real ID, so. And it says that Maryland is compliant, but I don't have that new ID. I know my mom just got hers, and I think Frankie has his. I don't have that, and I know my daughter's ID card doesn't have it either. So I need to get on the ball with that, because I'm trying to tell you, if you're not compliant, as you've heard that I shared with you, they will not allow you to board that plane. And there's no sense in you showing up there acting a plum fool because you didn't do what you needed to do. So please make sure all your stuff is together so that you can go and enjoy your trips and have a great time. So again, you guys, that is all I have to share with you. I won't be linking the DMV's website because that's going to depend on what state you live in. So you'll have to go and find that on your own. But in terms of the states that are compliant and the ones that have received extensions, I will link that in the description box so you can just see that as a glance. It's because I want you, like I said, I want you guys to be prepared. That's all I have, you guys. Thank you so much to my new subscribers. Thank you so much to those of you that continue to support me in all that I do. Please make sure you have your proper ID, because I want you all to have fun trips. I don't want you to have any hang-ups because you don't have what you need to have. Get it and forget it. Until next time, take care.